The lunch rush at the downtown bistro was a storm of clinking cutlery, steaming plates, and impatient voices. Amid the chaos moved Elena, a 28-year-old waitress whose black apron had long since lost its shine. To most customers, she was invisible, another face balancing trays and wiping tables. What nobody saw was the notebook tucked into her apron pocket, filled with scribbles in French, Mandarin, and Arabic, words she'd taught herself after closing shifts. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of her tiny apartment, while her younger brother did his homework at the kitchen table, Elena's days were a loop of early mornings, double shifts and bus rides home long after midnight. She'd learned to smile through exhaustion, to swallow insults from hurried diners, to stretch tips into groceries and rent. Yet she refused to let her mind stagnate. Every free moment she devoured language apps, borrowed dictionaries from the library, and practiced accents under her breath while clearing tables. 5 languages in 6 years, a private victory she never broadcast. On this humid Thursday, the bell over the door chimed, and a ripple of attention swept through the room. In walked Victor Caro, a venture capitalist whose face often appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about billion-dollar deals. His tailored suit looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. At his side was a younger associate with a tablet, already taking notes as Victor barked orders about their next acquisition. The staff whispered behind the counter. He was known for his temper and for treating servers like furniture. Elena's section ended 2 tables away, but as the hostess seated Victor near her station, she felt her stomach tighten. She'd seen his interviews on business channels. His condescension was legendary. Still, she straightened her shoulders and approached with her practiced calm. "Good afternoon. Can I start you with something to drink?" she asked softly. Victor barely glanced up. "Espresso double and be quick," he said, then muttered something under his breath in French to his associate, a cutting remark about the staff's incompetence. He assumed, as always, no one around him understood. Elena's eyes flicked up for just a second. She understood every word, but she only smiled politely and walked back toward the coffee machine, the muscles in her jaw tightening. Her moment wasn't yet, but it was coming. Steam hissed from the espresso machine as Elena steadied her hands on the portafilter. The bitter aroma rose around her like armor, something solid to hold on to while the billionaire at table 3 dripped contempt onto the floor. She had endured rude customers before. The city was full of them. But Victor Caro's offhand remark in French had sliced closer than she expected. "They don't even know which side of the cup to hold," he had said with a laugh. His associate had smirked, tapping the tablet screen as if recording every insult. Elena forced her breath to slow. "Don't react, not yet." She poured the espresso, wiped the saucer until it gleamed, and carried it back through the maze of tables. Her shoes squeaked on the tiles, but her face was serene, the same professional mask she had learned to wear over years of double shifts. "Your espresso." "Sir," she said, setting it down with quiet precision. Victor didn't thank her. He lifted the tiny cup, sniffed it like a critic at a wine tasting, and took a sip. "Too bitter," he said flatly. "Try again," Elena blinked. "I'm sorry, sir." "This is our house blend." "I said try again," he cut her off. "And hurry. Time is money." Then, switching to Italian, he muttered something about slow staff who think they're special. Her fingers curled against her apron. She knew Italian, too. She knew every word of the insult. But she only inclined her head and collected the cup. "Of course, sir." At the service station, Lisa, the other waitress on duty, gave her a sympathetic look. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "He's like this every time." "I'm fine," Elena said, though her pulse thudded in her ears. "One more espresso." While she prepared the second shot, Victor's voice carried across the room. "Is it so hard to find competent help in this city?" he asked loudly in English this time. They should at least hire someone who understands a real language. A few diners turned to look. His associate chuckled dutifully. Elena's hand trembled for the first time. She set the cup down, stared at the dark swirl of coffee, and thought of all the nights she'd stayed up translating French novels, of all the words she had taught herself when no one believed she could. 5 languages, hundreds of hours, all invisible. She straightened. "You've earned your dignity. Don't let him erase it." Carrying the fresh espresso, she approached again, posture tall, eyes calm. She set the cup down. "Here you go," she said, voice steady. Victor smirked. Let's see if the second time is any better. He sipped, then raised an eyebrow at his associate. Better, he said in a mocking French accent, but still not perfect. Perhaps you should study a little harder, mademoiselle. The insult landed like a slap. He had no idea she actually understood. Around them, the diner hummed with quiet tension. People were listening now. Elena drew a slow breath. She could feel the words on the tip of her tongue in every language she knew. She thought of her brother at home, the unpaid bills, the notebook full of translations. Her heart hammered. Then, with the same calm she used to balance a full tray, she looked Victor Caro directly in the eye and answered him, not in English, but in flawless French, her accent crisp and formal. Monsieur Caro, je parle 5 langues, y compris le français. Peut-être devriez-vous apprendre la politesse avant de juger les autres. Monsieur Caro, I speak 5 languages, including French. Perhaps you should learn politeness before judging others. The words landed like a stone dropped into water. Conversation around them stopped. Victor froze, his espresso halfway to his lips. His associate's eyes widened. Elena didn't wait for a reply. She gave a small, professional smile, turned on her heel, and walked back toward the counter, every step measured. Her hands were still trembling, but this time from release, not restraint. For a heartbeat after her words, the cafe was silent except for the hiss of the espresso machine. It felt as if the whole room had inhaled at once and forgotten how to exhale. Victor Caro's eyes flicked from her, retreating back to his stunned associate. The billionaire who barked orders at CEOs looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under him. Elena reached the counter and steadied herself against the cool metal edge. Her chest rose and fell like she'd just sprinted. Lisa darted over, eyes wide. Elena, she whispered. Did you just... I did, Elena said softly, fingers smoothing her apron. I'm done letting him walk over me. From across the room, Victor cleared his throat. Miss, he began, but his voice cracked. He switched back to English. Could you come here a moment? Elena turned, her expression calm. Is there a problem with your order, sir? His associate, still staring, muttered in Italian. She speaks it perfectly. Victor's jaw tightened. No problem, he said finally. Just sit for a moment. I'd like to apologize. Several customers had their phones out, pretending to scroll but obviously recording. Lisa squeezed Elena's arm. You don't have to, she whispered. I know, Elena replied. But maybe I should hear him out? She crossed back to the table slowly, aware of every eye. Victor gestured at the empty chair across from him. Please, he said. Sit. Elena didn't sit, but she stopped at the edge of the table. I'm working, she said evenly. Victor nodded once, chastened. Then allow me to say this quickly. I was wrong. I made assumptions. That was unprofessional of me. His voice had lost its sharpness. Elena tilted her head. Thank you, she said. Apology accepted. Victor's associate leaned forward. 5 languages? He asked, almost incredulous. Elena's lips quirked in the faintest smile. 6 if you count the sign language I'm learning. Victor rubbed his chin, a flicker of interest replacing embarrassment. Do you translate professionally? No, Elena said, not yet. Why not? Because I'm here, she said simply, gesturing at the cafe, keeping the lights on. Victor exchanged a glance with his associate. We're expanding into East Asia and the Middle East. We've been searching for someone who could liaise with clients in multiple languages. You've just demonstrated exactly the skill set we need. Elena blinked. She had imagined standing up for herself. She had never imagined this. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an interview, Victor said, his tone now respectful. And if you're half as good as you seem, a position. He pulled a sleek card from his breast pocket and slid it across the table. My assistant will set it up tomorrow. Elena stared at the card. Her hands felt suddenly light, like she might drop it. Around them, the cafe noise resumed, but softer, like a tide going out. She straightened. I'll think about it, she said. Right now I have customers waiting. Victor smiled faintly, almost sheepishly. Of course. Thank you for the coffee. Elena returned to the counter, the card burning against her palm. Lisa was practically vibrating. Did he just offer you a job? She hissed. I think he did, Elena murmured. But I'm not sure yet. I don't even know his company. Lisa grinned. Girl, you just shut down a billionaire in 3 languages. If he's smart enough to offer, you're smart enough to take it. Elena slipped the card into her apron pocket like a secret. She still had an hour left on her shift, dishes to clear, tips to count. But the weight of exhaustion felt different now, lighter, like it might lift off entirely. At table 3, Victor watched her move behind the counter with a new expression. Not contempt, but calculation mixed with respect. He had come in expecting another anonymous service worker. Instead, he had discovered someone who could bridge worlds. Elena filled another coffee pot and glanced at the clock. 50 minutes left. She could make it. She always did. But for the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar rising through the fatigue, the sense that her life was about to change. The next morning, Elena sat at her tiny kitchen table, the billionaire's business card lying beside her coffee mug like a dare. Her younger brother, Matteo, was hunched over a cereal bowl, his school bag already packed. He glanced at her phone in her hand. "You gonna call him?" he asked between bites. Elena twirled the card between her fingers. "I don't know. What if it's a joke?" Matteo shrugged. "Then you go back to the cafe." "But what if it isn't?" She looked at her brother. The reason she'd taken every extra shift, the reason she'd taught herself languages at night when the apartment was quiet. "You're right," she said and dialed the number. A polished voice answered. "Mr. Caro's office." "This is Elena Vargas," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He asked me to call." Within minutes she had an appointment. By noon she was standing in the glass and steel lobby of Caro Global, her diner uniform replaced by a clean blouse, dark trousers, and a simple braid. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and money. People in tailored suits moved briskly through the space, their badges flashing. Elena's stomach flipped, but she straightened her shoulders. She'd spent years walking into rooms where no one thought she belonged. This would be no different. A young assistant led her to a conference room on the 18th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled sunlight across a polished table, where 4 people sat with laptops open. At the head, Victor Caro rose to greet her. "Ms. Vargas," he said, his handshake firm but not overbearing. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. Victor gestured for her to sit. "This is my leadership team. I told them what happened yesterday. They want to see for themselves." A woman slid a folder toward her. "Here's a contract we're negotiating with a partner in Shanghai. Could you translate the first 2 pages?" she asked. Elena opened the folder. The Mandarin characters blurred for a second as nerves fluttered through her. She inhaled slowly. "You've read harder texts at 2 a.m. in the library," she reminded herself. Then she began to read aloud, rendering the clauses into clear, precise English. The team exchanged glances. Another man switched to French mid-question, trying to catch her off guard. She answered him smoothly, then flipped into Arabic when he asked about a client in Dubai. By the time she switched back to English, the room had gone silent. Victor leaned back, a slow smile forming. "I told you," he said to his colleagues. "She's the real deal." The woman who had given her the folder closed her laptop. "How soon could you start?" she asked. Elena blinked. "Are you offering me the job?" "We're offering you more than a job," Victor said. "A career. Translator, liaison, negotiator. You can shape it how you want. The pay and benefits will reflect your skills." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. All the nights of practicing flashcards, all the shifts wiping counters, all the insults swallowed. And now this. She felt her hands tremble under the table. Yes, she said finally. "I accept," Victor extended his hand again. "Welcome to Caro Global, Ms. Vargas. Let's change some borders together." When she left the building an hour later, the sun felt warmer, the street wider. She bought 2 churros from a food cart for Matteo, texting him a single line. It wasn't a joke. That evening, she folded her cafe apron and set it on the counter for the last time. Lisa hugged her tight. "Go knock 'em dead," she said. "You earned this." Elena smiled, slipping her new ID badge into her purse. For the first time in years, she wasn't counting the minutes until her shift ended. She was counting the days until a new life began. 3 weeks later, Elena pushed open the door of the same cafe where she had spent so many double shifts. Only this time she wasn't wearing an apron. Her navy blazer hung just right across her shoulders, her heels clicking softly on the tiles. In one hand she held a sleek laptop bag, in the other a takeout ticket for Matteo's favorite breakfast sandwich. She had left her badge clipped inside her purse, Senior Language Liaison, Caro Global, but she still felt it like a warm pulse against her palm. Lisa spotted her from behind the counter and broke into a grin. "Look at you," she said, coming around to give her a hug. "You're glowing," Elena laughed. "It's just a blazer." "No," Lisa said. "It's everything."
"How's the new job?"
Elena's smile widened. "Challenging, but good. I spent all morning on a call with Shanghai and then one with Dubai. My calendar looks like a flight map." Lisa shook her head in amazement, from pouring coffee to running the world. Elena accepted her coffee and waited at the counter while Lisa rang up the order. Then a familiar voice floated from the corner booth, sharp, impatient. "This place is going downhill," the voice said. "Service used to be faster." Elena turned. Victor Caro wasn't there, he was in Singapore for negotiations. But at table 7 sat the very same couple who had belittled her before, Michael and Sophia. Sophia's phone lay face up on the table, her manicured finger tapping irritably. Michael was scrolling through emails, half listening. "Excuse me," Sophia called to the new waitress. "Another latte, and try to make it right this time." The young waitress hurried past with an apologetic nod. Sophia sighed dramatically. "Honestly, some people just don't have any ambition." Elena felt the old flicker of tension rise, but it dissolved as quickly as it came. She was no longer a trapped employee swallowing insults. She was a professional who had earned her place at the table. She picked up her to-go bag and walked over to table 7, her step steady. "Good morning," she said, her tone polite but cool. Sophia looked up, frowning. "Do we know you?" Elena smiled, not the tight smile she used to wear, but a real one, confident. "I used to work here," she said. "You probably don't remember, but I remember you." Michael looked up from his phone, eyes narrowing. "Oh, the waitress." "Not anymore." She reached into her bag and pulled out a crisp business card. "Elena Vargas, Caro Global," it read in embossed letters. She placed it gently on the table. "If you ever need translation or international liaison services, give me a call. We specialize in helping businesses talk to each other across cultures." Sophia blinked. "Wait, you work for Caro Global?" "The Caro Global?" Elena nodded once. "Senior liaison. 6 languages." She paused just long enough for the weight of the words to settle. "And a good memory." Michael's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Impressive," he muttered, sliding the card closer. Elena straightened. "Enjoy your latte," she said, and turned to go, her takeout bag swinging lightly at her side. Lisa had watched the whole thing from behind the counter. When Elena reached her, she whispered, "That was the best thing I've ever seen." Elena chuckled. It wasn't revenge, just closure. Outside, the city air felt crisp, bright. She thought of Mateo waiting at home, of the conference calls she'd handle that afternoon, of the doors still waiting to open. She had once been invisible at table 7. Now she was living proof that hard work, self-respect, and skill could outlast arrogance. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and stepped into the sunlight. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was leaving the cafe behind. She felt like she was carrying something forward, a story, a lesson, and the quiet power of knowing exactly who she was. The following month blurred into early mornings and late nights. Elena had been given her first major assignment at Caro Global: coordinate a high-stakes negotiation between a European tech manufacturer and a Latin American government, a deal worth hundreds of millions. The official translators on both sides were competent, but tempers were high and trust was thin. Victor Caro had leaned across the conference table, his usual confidence shaded by worry. "Elena," he'd said quietly before the first meeting, "this entire partnership hinges on clarity. You're not just translating words, you're translating intent. I'm trusting you." The weight of that trust settled on her shoulders like armor rather than chains. She entered the meeting room, a polished glass chamber with flags of 3 countries standing side by side, and felt her pulse slow. She began to work, listening, interpreting, reframing when necessary. She didn't simply repeat what each delegate said. She adjusted tone, softened edges, explained cultural subtext. When a joke fell flat on one side of the table, she offered an equivalent idiom in the other language, and tension melted into laughter. The negotiation that had seemed doomed to fail started to flow. During breaks, she scribbled notes in the margins of her binder. Patience, empathy, context over literalness. She caught Victor watching her with something like admiration. By the second day, both parties had agreed on a draft contract. By the third, they were shaking hands. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Elena stood slightly behind the principals, out of the spotlight but radiating quiet pride. When the journalists asked how the deadlock had been broken, Victor simply said, "We had the right bridge at the right time." Later, in the privacy of his office, he handed Elena a small box. Inside was a silver pen engraved with her name. "Not a trophy," he said, "a tool. Keep building bridges." That evening, instead of collapsing into bed, Elena met with a group of junior hires at a coffee shop near headquarters. They were interns and assistants, many of them immigrants or first-generation students, struggling with the same self-doubt she had once carried. She spread her notes on the table and began walking them through real examples from the negotiation. "It's not only about vocabulary," she told them. "It's about listening for what isn't said, about respecting everyone at the table even if they don't respect you yet." One of the interns, a shy young man from Morocco, asked, "But what if they dismiss you? What if they see you as just the help?" Elena smiled. "Then you remember who you are. You remember the skills you've built, and you keep showing up calmly until they can't ignore you." She stayed late, answering questions, suggesting language courses, even offering to review their resumes. When she finally walked home under the city's neon glow, she felt lighter than she had all week. She realized she no longer defined success only by climbing upward. Success also meant reaching back. At her apartment, Matteo had left a drawing on the table, a stick figure version of her holding a microphone in front of two flags. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, "My mom speaks for the world." Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. She placed the silver pen next to the drawing and whispered, "We're just getting started." The next morning, she entered Caro Global's lobby, not as a newcomer scrambling to prove herself, but as a leader. She was already thinking about the next deal, the next mentee, the next bridge. The same fire that had once kept her awake during double shifts now powered her forward, steady and bright. A year later, Elena stood at the edge of a stage framed by velvet curtains. Beyond the lights, an audience of hundreds filled the grand hall of an international leadership summit. Flags lined the walls. Nameplates from 50 countries dotted the front rows. She could feel the gentle thrum of anticipation ripple through the crowd. She smoothed her navy dress. No apron, no name tag, just the badge of keynote speaker. When the announcer called her name, she stepped into the spotlight. The applause rose like a wave. For a heartbeat, she saw not diplomats and executives, but every night she had stood behind a cafe counter. Every time she had been underestimated, every time she had chosen to keep going anyway. She drew a slow breath and began. "I once worked in a small cafe on the corner of River and Ninth," she said. "I served coffee to people rushing to important meetings. I was invisible to most of them, but I wasn't invisible to myself. I was learning, studying, preparing." Her voice steadied, gathering strength. "Today I stand before you not as a translator of words, but as a bridge between worlds." She spoke of humility and skill, of the power of language to build trust, of respect as the true currency of global business. She told them how one small act of speaking up had changed the direction of her life. She finished with a simple challenge. "Wherever you are, whatever your title, remember, you are already building the foundation of your future. Treat every moment as preparation for the next door you will walk through." When she ended, the room was silent for a second, then erupted into applause. In the front row, she saw Victor Caro clapping, a proud smile on his face. 2 rows behind him sat a group of young interns she'd mentored, beaming at her. As Elena left the stage, a young woman stopped her in the aisle. "I'm a waitress," she whispered, eyes bright. "I speak 3 languages. Seeing you up there, I think maybe I can do it too." Elena squeezed her hand. "You already can," she said softly. "Start building now." Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. She had become more than a translator. She had become a voice, one, and a path for others. 2 years later, the cafe on River and Ninth had changed owners. The walls were painted a soft cream, the tables were finished. Elena stood at the counter with a group of young professionals she was mentoring through a free evening class on languages and international business. Once a month, she held these sessions off-site, away from the glass towers of downtown. She wanted her students to feel the same hum of possibility she had felt here, even in her lowest moments. She watched them settle in with their notebooks, some still in work uniforms, others with tired eyes from long shifts. Every one of them carried the same hunger she once had. She set her silver pen next to her lesson plan and began. "Welcome," she said. "Tonight we're going to talk about how words open doors." As she spoke, she glanced at the empty corner booth where she had once hidden during breaks. That spot no longer carried bitterness. It had become a reminder of distance traveled. She had spoken at global summits, negotiated landmark deals, and now she was building a nonprofit to sponsor language training for low-income workers. But the heart of her work wasn't prestige. It was this room, these faces, this chance to reach back. After the session ended, one student lingered, a teenage boy in a faded apron. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I want to study, but people laugh when I tell them." Elena smiled and handed him a fresh notebook. "Let them laugh," she said gently. "Start anyway. Every translation you do, every new word you learn, it's a brick in the bridge you're building." He held the notebook as if it were a passport. "Thank you," he murmured. When the room emptied, Elena stayed a moment longer, inhaling the scent of fresh coffee and new beginnings. She remembered her first shifts, the sting of dismissal, the moment she had chosen to speak up. That small act had led her here. Stepping into the evening air, she felt no distance between who she had been and who she had become. The bridge she'd built wasn't just for her. It was a path for anyone ready to cross.